In this video, I'm going to teach you how you can be a faster video editor in Adobe Premiere. Now, I made that mistake because I've been programming all my life, doing software development and whatnot, and I've actually applied a unique approach to my video editing techniques, obviously from a programmer's mindset. In fact, my mantra for programming is all about automation and doing more with less actions. And these principles and techniques can be applied to video editing to make you a lot more efficient and in the end, produce a lot more videos and hopefully generate more revenue for your business. So with that in mind, let's go into 7 things that I really wish I knew prior to actually starting my Adobe Premiere video editing career. Let's get right into it. So the first programming principle that you typically do in any type of software development project is to have a really good folder structure and also have consistency. In fact, consistency is very key when it comes to programming and kind of just having a very structured environment. This is especially crucial in large projects where it's very complex and you have a lot of timelines and a lot of B-roll and different types of footage. So typically in any software development project, when you start a new project, you may have this thing called a seed project. And this seed project is kind of like what generates your template when it comes to Adobe Premiere. All you have to do is type in a name and then it's going to generate the folder structure for you. So this makes it really easy for the programmer to not have to know where to put everything and how to set up all the nuts and bolts. Now, obviously for video editing, it's not going to be as complicated as programming, but it definitely saves you a lot of time and helps you maintain that consistency over many, many years when you're doing all your projects. So let's go into what my script does and we're going to see how it works. So here I go into a common folder. And then you can see my project template. So I made a backup of my template. I'm going to share this on the link in the description of this video. So typically I like to have the shortcut on my desktop so I don't have to go into this folder structure, but I just want to show you where it is. So what I do is just simply double click it. And in this video, we're actually going to edit a new video that I'm going to be creating. And it's about cable management and all the tips and tricks about how to kind of better organize your desk. Anyways, that's going to be a separate video, but we're going to call it, let's say, cable management tips, for example. I'm going to hit enter and then boom. As you saw that, it just created a new folder with all my structured folders. And here you can see that there's a project. So we're going to go into the structure of this and how I formed it. You obviously can customize it to your liking. So under the hood, this script is not really doing much. All it's doing is just copying files from one location to another and then renaming it based on the project name that you provided. Now this may seem trivial, but it does save you a lot of time in having to like copy and paste and all that stuff. So it just makes it really easy. Here, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So here I've defined the kind of the template of all the stuff I have, and we'll go into the folder structure a little bit later. And then here I've defined what the script does. And at this line over here, you can redefine it as you wish if you download this template, and you can customize it as you want. So you can define where the folder, where the template sits and then where it needs to be copied to. So this all can be customized. It's pretty straightforward. That's pretty much it. A very simple script. It's going to save us a lot of time, repetition, and of course, maintain that consistency, which is very key. So let's talk about the folder structure. Now you may look at this and seem like, wow, this is really complicated. Maybe I don't need all this. If you have like a really simple, like maybe one simple clip of you talking and maybe a couple clips of B-roll. But trust me, when it comes to complex projects and you have multiple different cameras and lots of B-roll and lots of different types of subjects that you're talking about, having this type of organization is really going to help you. So you might be wondering, okay, why is all the folders kind of numbered in this kind of weird way? Well, that just makes it really easy in Adobe Premiere to kind of organize it so that it's always in an alphabetical order, so that you know where exactly to, for example, get your sound effects or your screenshots. So footage is a very basic folder. It's going to capture all the footage. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and plop in the footage from my project. So this is kind of like the entire thing over here. I'm just going to plop that in. Now we have one screenshot, so I'm going to put it in the screenshots folder. So OBS recording is a very interesting tool that I use to record videos. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later and explain why that folder exists. Screenshots obviously are very useful if you're going to be, going onto a website, for example, let's say here, and then take a screenshot, have it saved to that folder. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Sound effects, video effects, which can be like graphics. Maybe you have a logo or some kind of cool like little graphic intro. You can just throw that in there. Soundtracks, of course, something that you want to layer on music. And then this is for thumbnails and exports. So what I like to do quite often is take a still from my video timeline and then maybe use that for a thumbnail in a YouTube video, or just have my exported project over here. So everything is structured. Now these folders here are just auto-generated. You don't really need to have them in your base template, but they're just there for whatever reason. Yeah, we don't really need that. And of course, there's some really interesting stuff here. So my keyboard shortcuts training. So this basically takes me to where all my keyboard shortcuts. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It's good to have this here all the time. And then here is an index. So just kind of like the structure that I like to keep when I export this video to YouTube. I have some disclaimers and, things that I like to share with people in the description. So as you may notice, there's this cable management tips project, and that was obviously just copied from the base project. So let's go and actually see what is inside. So let's double click it. And then voila, you can see all the bins are here and they're already pre-organized, which is really nice. So I'm going to open up the main project window with the tilde short key. This is a very handy shortcut, so you can actually do some project management over here. So let's open that up. And then here you can see all our folders. So you can see that footage, sequences, was not a system folder. If I go back to the actual project structure, you can see that it's missing here 0, 2. So this is number 1. And then we have some other ones that are not actually part of the system folder. So nested clips, backup sequences, and then we have thumbnails. That's part of the common one. Now we have a common folder which has things like black video, and here is a very interesting one. This is like actually a font. So if I quickly just add in a font T to add a font, you can't really see anything there, but if I apply the font, then there you go. This is a really good way to kind of just keep a consistent font. Now you can define this whatever you want it to be. You can just go into the graphics and then change it, but we'll save that for a separate video. Another common folder I often create for every new project is a folder to hold all my audio recordings when I do voiceovers. And I also created a default sequence so I can always record into that. I don't have to record into the actual timeline because that can be very annoying when you're trying to overlap. So let's say I'm working right here on this video. I'll just switch to the actual voiceover recording and I just have some stuff in here. And then I can hit the record button and then it's got to automatically start creating clips over here. So I'm recording right now, and then once I'm done recording, it's going to create an audio clip. And what I notice is that when I create a lot of audio recordings, it's going to all start to build up, and then it just gets really messy, especially if you have it in the icon mode. You have all these icons here. So what I end up doing is I have to manually put it in here. So if you know an easier way to automatically record voiceovers into a specified folder, please let me know in the comment section down below. And then finally, we have our template sequences. And this one's a really interesting one because let's expand it again. Here you can see these are all the common kind of aspect ratios and frame rates that I use. Here you can see 2.7, 30 frames per second, 4K 24p, which is probably the most common one I use for YouTube. And then we have a vertical one. So if you want to get into YouTube Shorts, for example, or you want to post to Instagram or be on social media in general, it's really handy to have this kind of sequence that is already predefined for you so that you can just, obviously you're going to want to create a copy. You don't want to be using your base template. So for example, I'm going to Control C and then just paste it into my actual sequences folder. And then I'm going to rename this like to project main vertical. And then there you have a vertical aspect ratio. So that is very handy to have. So all my other sequences are not that fancy. Let's go back into it really quickly. Backup sequences, sorry. So yeah, there's 1080p, which is nice to save on disk space. I can use that one. 1080p 30 for action sports and stuff like that. All this is for free. You just get it from the template generator and it's all very nice and structured. And yeah, so this makes it really easy to kind of just start your project and you don't have to, create all these folders again, repeat it so many times. That would be extremely annoying. So all this project prep has led me to my second point, and this one is a really big one. This is all about system folder synchronization with your Adobe bins, all these bins here. Now you can see that when I opened this project, you notice that there's nothing here, there's no footage, but in the actual system folder, there's a ton of footage. And you're like, oh, what the heck, what happened? Well, wait till you see I do this. I'm gonna click this little button over here. This is called the Watchtower, and then boom. Everything is being imported. I want to say that this plugin called Watchtower, which is built by this company called Knights of the Editing Table, I have to say it is extremely, immensely useful. And I'm really surprised that it's not super known in like the big YouTube influencers. So let me do a quick demo on how the Watchtower plugin works and how it really improves my workflow. Now, often I want to share a screenshot, especially if I'm demoing a product. And I do this very often, especially in the mid-cycle, kind of like when I'm editing a lot on the timeline. And like I said, having to go into your system folder and then drag it in, it's just very, very tedious and it really takes you out of workflow, takes you out of your context. So how do I do that? So what I do is I use my keyboard shortcut command, which we'll be talking about later. It's Windows Shift S, and this will allow me to take a screenshot of this. And then I'm going to save it to the folder. I'm going to call this Timbolt homepage version 2. And then you're like, okay, where is it? Well, I have to hit this little quick button on Watchtower, and you can have it auto sync. I'll explain why I didn't have it in auto sync enabled, but let's just click it. And then boom, right away, it takes me to that exact bin, the screenshots bin, and it highlights that actual screenshot that I had. So I can just quickly drag it to my timeline. And trust me, that's way, way faster than having to do the alternative method, which is like, okay, let me find my project. It's like, okay, where's my project? It's right here. And then you have to get the screenshot and then copy it over. That's just way too much work. And especially when you're really focus on the timeline. You just want to capture that screenshot as fast as possible and put it on your timeline. This plugin really saves a lot. Okay, so you might be wondering, why do I not have auto sync enabled? Well, it has to do with OBS Recorder, which is this piece of software that allows me to record YouTube clips and presentations and whatnot. If you have that synced to your project, to, for example, a OBS folder project, let's go back to the main template over here. So OBS recordings is a watched directory, and I like to have it record into here. If I record into there, it's going to be a partial video file because it's obviously streaming into it. So it's gonna act a little funny. So I just simply have it disabled. I'm gonna go into the settings. So enable auto sync, I just have it disabled. And then every time you want to import something, you can just quickly hit the refresh button. Now I did talk to the developer. He's very active. His support is amazing. He was very helpful. I asked him how we can have a workaround for this, and he said he's working on a fix. Now, one thing I want to quickly mention about the base template is that basically I've already set it up in my template so that it uses a relative folder structure. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you go into the settings, so I go to advanced, and you can see that you can import image sequences, which is basically if you have a bunch of images, it'll know how to like kind of create it into one sequence. You can flatten a folder, which I don't really use, but then there's this really useful feature called R, which is use relative path. And basically what that means is when you are importing footage to, let's say, this folder over here, so no matter where the project is located in your system folders, it's going to know to read that folder because it's using the relative folder path. So basically you don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is drag the footage into your predefined project and it'll automatically import. So it just makes the whole process a lot easier. So far we talked about 2 tips: project organization and Watchtower for awesome synchronization to your system folders. For my next tip, my 3rd tip, it's going to be very programming focused. And this is all about key bindings, keyboard shortcuts. Now, I know you must have heard this a long time before, but let me just really drill this down that this is it's crucial to your success as a long-term video editor. Let me explain why. So one of the key principles to being a really good programmer, especially if you work professionally, is to have really good knowledge of your keyboard shortcuts in your IDE, which is basically the development editor where you see all your files and whatnot. So not having these keyboard shortcuts, it's really going to make you a slower programmer, and it kind of shows you to look like kind of like a noob, for example, because you really don't want to have to be reaching for the mouse quite often just to do a command. You really want to stay, locked into your keyboard so that you can edit or program as fast as possible. Now, these programming principles don't just apply to video editing, it applies to any type of office work. In fact, it really, really helps out in video editing because you'll be using your keyboard a lot and you really, really want to avoid using your mouse. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, the main thing is actually your health. You want to avoid repetitive strain injury. Having carpal tunnel syndrome is no joke, and it can be very painful, especially if you're kind of like awkwardly reaching your mouse and then moving your hand to the keyboard often. So what you want to strive for is to keep your left hand always on the keyboard, on the left side of the keyboard. And you want to keep your right hand on the mouse because yes, we are using our mouse more often than programmers in order to seek the timeline and kind of, see clips and touch clips. Unfortunately, video editing is more visual than programming, so you're definitely going to have to be using your mouse quite a lot. In fact, I made a whole video on how you can be really productive just in general in the office environment using an MMO gaming mouse. Now, this gaming mouse has 12 buttons on the side. You can program to do whatever you want. I don't particularly use it in Adobe Premiere, but I use it in kind of web browsing and surfing the web and actually doing research and stuff like that by rearranging my windows and changing volume and stuff like that. So I made a whole video about that. I'll leave a link in the description. Definitely check it out if you want to improve your productivity using a mouse. So back to actually video editing. Another really important reason why you want to use keyboard shortcuts is to save time and obviously save money because time is money, right? Well, it's not only just how you save time, it's really about how you context switch. For example, if you want to apply an effect, it would typically take a lot of steps and you would have to move the mouse around, maybe click a different panel and stuff like that. Where there's actually keyboard shortcuts and plugins, which I'll talk about a little bit later, to make some of these routine tasks, some things that you just do all the time, really, really fast and easy. And it really keeps you in that flow state where you're able to edit and not be distracted by having to do some menial tasks, like some repetitive tasks, for example. Now, one of the things a lot of people struggle with, including myself when I first started programming or video editing, was that I committed using my mouse to muscle memory, for example, and I was not using key bindings as much as I wanted to. It's kind of interesting how these habits that we need to really develop take a lot of effort. But if you make a little improvement every day, it really compounds and you pay the short-term price for very, really really good long-term gain. There's this notion of two ways of how we think. First is the very autonomous system, and the second is the very deep reflective system. And our automatic system really wants to just reach for the mouse, and for example, and go to the effect panel, look for effects, for example. Okay, where's my effect? Type in lumetri color. You get the example, right? And then, okay, let me apply it to my clip. So that took you a lot of work, but your knee-jerk reaction, you automatically just reach for the mouse and go for it. Your system too needs to like take a break and kind of look at the big picture and kind of make more like a logical decision of like, okay, well, if I apply this effect all the time, maybe it's worth, automating it or assign it to a shortcut so that it makes it a lot easier and it doesn't take you out of workflow. So you really need to like stop for a second, really commit hard to actually use key bindings, because trust me, our urge is always to grab the mouse and like click things. And because we're so visual, we just want to click it. It's more obvious. And key bindings are a little bit more abstract and it's very hard. So what I recommend to kind of cultivate a really good habit is to reduce the amount of friction. So a practical way to do this is to actually have a cheat sheet. So what I've done is actually created a shortcut to a cheat sheet for my keyboard shortcuts. And here you can see these are all my very commonly used shortcuts that I really want to commit to memory. And I'm trying to make a habit out of it. So every time I do an action, I kind of like, okay, well, do I really need to use a mouse for this? Can I use a keyboard shortcut, or can I create a new keyboard shortcut? And really think about what commands are you doing very often and just write them down and then assign them the shortcuts and then commit that to memory. And trust me, over a couple of years, you're going to be just way more proficient at video editing, and it's going to save you a lot of frustration and time. So how exactly do you do a keyboard shortcut? Well, ironically, to get to the settings page to actually assign keyboard shortcuts, you probably want to assign that to a keyboard shortcut. Now, I think the default one is Control-Alt-K, and this will bring you to the actual place where all your shortcuts are done. And what I really like about this interface is that it's actually quite intuitive to set up your key binding. So what I can do is hold Shift. You can see that the layout changes. If I highlight over, you can see that what exactly is binding to Shift and then Q. And when I let go of Q, you can see that Q is assigned to different types of commands. So using your modifier keys is going to give you a lot of real estate, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So try to learn maybe 3 or 4 at a time, and try not to go crazy and learn like 10 different shortcuts, because trust me, you're going to be a little bit demotivated if you can't remember them all on the first try. Now, there are so many shortcuts I use day to day, and you really need to kind of start editing and see what you use. But personally, if I had to name 3 shortcuts that will literally save you a tons of time and that you should do automatically and right away, it would have to be these ones. The first one is Q. Now, what is Q? So if I click on it, you can see, what does it do? It does this really complicated thing called ripple, trim, previous edit to playhead. So, okay, what exactly does that mean? We'll find out a little bit later. And then W, it's ripple, trim, next edit to playhead. Okay, so what does that do? We'll talk about that later. And then finally S, which it was typically assigned to L, but L is on the other side of the keyboard. It's on the right side of the keyboard. Like I said, I want to keep as many key bindings on the right side, on the left side, so that I don't have to take my hand off my mouse and move it to the other side of the keyboard. That makes it really awkward. So I move this key binding L to here. So what does S do? It does shuttle right. The last 2 essential keyboard shortcuts are customized to my liking, and that's Z for add edit and X for ripple delete. So typically when you're editing, you're going to be using these 5 key combinations to speed up your process. So I'm going to hit the play button, hit the space bar, and it's going to be playing at a normal speed. If I hit S, and by default it's L, but I moved it to S. If I hit S, it's going to speed up the playback. Okay, so let's say we do S. Make the mistake, I'm not cutting the footage from here. S. So as you hear and see, it increases the playback speed. So this makes it a lot easier to scrub through footage and kind of just move the timeline a little bit faster. So what happens when you want to start cutting footage? Well, a new person to Adobe Premiere might do the very slow method of going to their command menu over here. Let's say they want to ripple delete or cut a tool. So they use the razor tool. They mark it here, then they select the clip, then hit delete, then do ripple delete. And that was all done with the mouse and the keyboard and using the kind of UI over here. So that's a lot of kind of pointless labor work, and you can do it in a much more efficient way using keyboard shortcuts. And I'm going to talk about an even better way later in this video on how to completely eliminate having to do this work. But in this case, let's say I want to cut it over here. I will use the Z command, and this is going to add an edit. And then I will use the Q command to trim everything to the left of this playhead. The playhead is this thing that moves around. So I'm going to place it right here and hit Q. And then as you can see, everything to the left is deleted. So we can trim to the left, but we can also trim to the right. So let's say I add an edit over here. I move the cursor to the left and I use W, which will trim everything to the right of this, and it deletes it. So W deletes it. Now we can do something similar. Let's say we hit Z again, and then say we hit Z again here. Let's say we want to ripple delete this clip for whatever reason. You can use the shortcut X in my case to ripple delete. So those are the 5 keyboard shortcuts that I use every day for every type of clip, and it's going to make your editing workflow a lot faster. So to wrap this up, learn shortcuts. Trust me, you're going to thank yourself in the long run. It's going to make you edit way faster, and you're going to produce a lot more content. Okay, so for my next tip, and it has to do with a special plugin, and this is kind of like the advanced version of keyboard shortcuts. And this plugin is made by the same creator of Watchtower. So this is Knights of the Editing Table. And what this is very, very similar to what programmers are very used to in a Mac OS environment or in IntelliJ environment. So if you don't know what IntelliJ is, Alfred, which is a Mac OS plugin, don't worry. For those programmers out there, you basically have the same feature. And that's the ability to pretty much search everything in Adobe Premiere, well, most of everything, and to quickly apply that action to your clip. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I'm just editing this clip here, and I don't like how it's too dark for me, right? So I want to apply a very common effect. That's Lumetri color. So Control space bar. I'm going to have this little interface, and I'm not going to even type it. I'm just going to type LC, and then I can just quickly use my directional keys, and I can see, okay, Lumetri color. So this is an effect that I use very, very often. In fact, what I usually had to do was, okay, I'm editing this clip. Well, I have to go to effects. Then, I have to search for it. In my case, I'll just search it over here. Then I have all these presets. It's like, oh my goodness. Okay, I just want to drag it. So I had to drag it here. So that, and then I have to go to the effects tab and then apply all my effects and stuff like that. So let's say I want to change my exposure, whatever. So putting Lumetri color was a very involved process. And trust me, that's just something that you don't want to be doing all the time. So being able to just, not get out of your workflow, like I said, it's all about keeping that flow state. Control, spacebar, Lumetri, color, bam, done. Way, way faster. So for the price of the plugin, being able to search effects is already worth it. Honestly, there's so much more you can do with it. In fact, there's 2 YouTubers out here. I'm going to put a link to them. They cover this Excalibur plugin in great detail. They show you how you can do really cool stuff. Like, I don't know, let's just go into the settings. So I can just type settings, boom, go right into it. There's just so many like video transitions, all types of commands, and all of these are customizable. You can assign a shortcut. You can even define, let's say, for example, a custom user commands. So let's say I created a thing called Panimation. So let's say I want to apply a scale, for example, and I can say 20%, and then maybe I want to change the position. So I add another command called position and say I want to change add to value 20. Okay, so then I have my clip, type Panimation, and it just did that. So yeah, that is just an example of what you can do. There's so much more customization. I really do recommend checking out those videos, and I'll leave in a link in the description to the specific plugin. It's really hard to cover all the features and all the benefits you get out of this in the single video, so I will leave it to those 2 experts to show you how it works. For my next tip, I want to introduce a very powerful feature called markers in Adobe Premiere. Markers allow you to annotate your timeline and individual clips, which in turn helps you organize your footage even more and prepare chapter links for YouTube. Let's dive into how markers work and see how it can benefit you in your next project in different ways. So let's say in this massive timeline, I make a reference to, I don't know, some product or whatever, and I want to quickly find that specific reference so that I can go into my B-roll and then actually locate it. Because I could have hours and hours of B-roll, and to have to sift through all that footage is just way too much work. It's very exhausting. So what I typically do is this. So I'm gonna cancel this out, and I'm just gonna open all my projects. Just go ahead and open all your sequences, Okay, so here, each one represents kind of a category, for example. So in this case, this is the LifeX one, and this just kind of shows all the LifeX products and stuff like that. Now, in this case, I don't really need to annotate anything. I mean, there's not much to do, but using markers, and this is my next tip, using markers is very key, and it's going to help you in the long run. I'm going to explain how that works. So this is a really simple one. We don't really have to do much here, but let's say this is the light bulb. I'm just going to hit my shortcut. It's usually Control M on Windows, but in my case, I want to keep, like I said, everything on the left side of the keyboard. I don't want to have it on the right side. So M, the letter M is on the right side of the keyboard, so too far for me. So Control Q and then Control Q again. And what that's done is actually created a marker on the actual clip. There's a little bit difference about this when you apply the marker to the timeline. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So I'm going to give a little name. I'm going to call this bulb. And then as we seek through the timeline, here is the LifeX strip. So I'm going to hit Control Q twice, mark it, again. So you can see here, I have marker here and marker there. This is a little bit of a weird example. I think a better example would be if there was like a ton of footage and it would be really hard to isolate, okay, where's the bulb and where's the strip. So let's say I'm here or whatever on this part of a timeline and, you know, I'm looking for the smart bulb. I'm not looking for the strip, for example. How do I actually search for that? Well, I'm gonna type bulb and then just make sure that markers is selected. And then find, boom, just found it right there. I want to, let's say I'm like, oh, I don't know where I am in the timeline. I'm going to hit Control F. That's another keyboard shortcut, type strip, and then boom, it takes me to where the strip is. So this is a little bit of a weird example. It's not the greatest. Let me find something that is a little bit more interesting. I have a lot of different types of clips, and maybe I want to show off this thing here. This is called the mini cabinet or whatever for my desk. You can see all the footage here. I know it's under this main category. I'm looking for the mini cabinet because it's related to this desk, and then I don't know where it is. Just type mini, boom, right there, you have it. Now there's one little tricky thing about this is when you annotate your footage, if you don't select this actual clip here, you will end up marking the actual project, not the actual clip. So if I hit Q again, you can see the little green over here. And if I select this clip, you can see the little marker over here. So what is the better one? Well, there's this really big frustration I have with markers currently in Adobe Premiere, where if you mark, let's say on the timeline, so here, and here, and I don't know, let's say this is monitor. I'm talking about the monitor, for example. And then for whatever reason, I have to move it, my clips to the side. These markers don't move with it. You know, they should be here, here, and here. So that really sucks. If anyone knows that Adobe is going to fix this, please let me know in the comment section. Now, thankfully, Ripple Delete and Paste Insert still maintain timeline marker consistency. Let me explain how that works. So as you can see, I have all these markers here, and I'm going to be using that to kind of create my chapter links for my YouTube annotation. And let's say I'm going to insert something around here near the blue label over here. So let's say I copy this clip over here, and what I can do is called paste insert, and this is Control-Shift-V. So I just inserted that, and it shifted all the markers to the right. So this is really good. Now, if I ripple delete, I'm going to use my X command. It also maintains consistency. So yes, when you move it using this way, it doesn't keep the markers in line with the clips, unfortunately. But if you do paste insert or ripple delete, you'll still have that consistency. So typically near the end of my project, when I'm done editing everything, I will mark everything on the timeline to include chapter links. So project template, for example, and as I move over to this marker, I've marked another chapter annotation. And I much prefer to do this than doing it in the YouTube editor profile. So here I have all my chapter links for this video I recently created, the Fitbit Charge 5. And it's kind of a pain to kind of like seek through all your footage and then create it. So I created a streamlined process to take the actual export of your CSV of all the markers you created. So all you have to do is go to File, Export, Markers, and make sure you select comma separated values, and then you can just export it out. So what you'll end up with is a CSV file, as you can see over here, of all the markers that you've created on your timeline. So in the description of this video, I'll give you a link to this Google Doc that you can use. And I've created instructions on how to use this. All you need to do is make a copy. And on the first sheet over here, import Premiere Markers CSV. You can just delete all the sample data that I provided here. So just delete it. Take everything that you've created from your CSV export from Adobe Premiere and just paste it in the first column A1. And what that's going to do, if you click on the second spreadsheet, YouTube chapter links, it's actually going to create YouTube chapter links that you can just paste right into your YouTube video, for example. Just like that. So I hope I give you a more streamlined way to annotate your entire video project and then export it into a YouTube-friendly format. Another great use for markers is to add to-do notes, which is a very common practice in software development. Okay, so for my next tip, it's all about how you streamline your workflow when it comes to compiling your B-roll onto your A-roll. So what do I mean by that? Okay, now most Premiere users will tell you to use the source monitor and scrub through your B-roll and then put it onto the timeline. And this method I don't really like because it's not very intuitive, and it's also very hard to do when you have a lot of different types of footage. So for example, if I mark it in, mark it out, and you can use keyboard shortcuts for this. Now you can add to the timeline by using the period shortcut. And then there, you've isolated your B-roll footage right over here. Now that is not a very effective method. I'm going to tell you a better way to do it. So in my footage panel over here that's synchronized, you can see I have all these folders or bins with all my B-roll categorized by type. So BenQ monitor, behind the monitor. And you would typically create a new sequence based on the footage in that bin by dragging it to this icon over here. So this is the create new sequence. The one thing I don't like about this method of creating new sequences based on bins is that it creates the new sequence inside the actual bin. So you have to go into it and then find it. And what we're trying to do is trying to create a folder structure where all your sequences of your B-roll footage is organized in the sequence folder. So in order to do a more effective way, what I prefer to do is to actually grab your B-roll bin and drag it into the timeline, a blank timeline. So like that. And you want to repeat that process with all your other folders. So what you'll need to do is drag it into a blank timeline. That means you have to close this and then drag it. And then you're going to keep repeating this. Now this is a little bit monotonous and it's a little bit hard. I wish there was a way to automate it. If you do know, please let me know in the comment section. But the nice thing about this is that if you change your folder structure to a list view, you can see that all your sequences are created right in the directory that you're in. So this makes it very easy to organize all these timelines into your timeline folder. So we're gonna hit Control X to cut them. Then we're gonna go up a directory. We're gonna go into our sequences and then we're just gonna paste it in here. So that's gonna be an easier way to organize all your B-roll timeline sequences in the sequence folder. So once you're done organizing all your timeline sequences, you're gonna open them all up. And as you can see, everything is opened up. Now it's gonna be very easy to layer your B-roll onto your A-roll. So let's open up our A-roll. And then we're going to drag it down to the bottom panel. And this is going to separate the two. So now we can easily just grab footage from here. And let's say, for example, I like this. I'm going to cut it and then place it onto my timeline. So I hope I convinced you that this is a more effective way to layer B-roll onto your A-roll. And what's really good about this is that it's going to help you avoid duplicates. So what you want to do is just make, let's say you like this clip over here. You can do is just do a cut and do another cut and then just cut it over here and then paste it onto your timeline. Now, as you can see, one really annoying thing about cutting clips onto Adobe Premiere Timelines is that the track that is enabled, V1 and V2, it's always going to paste on the lower track. And Excalibur has a really good solution for this. So what I did is actually created a shortcut in Excalibur settings. So let's go to the settings. And then you can see under this one over here, Shift V, paste to the highest track. So what does this mean? So I cut the clip over here. I can hit Shift V, and then right away, it automatically pastes it onto the highest available track. And this is so much better because typically when you're working up and not, you don't want to overwrite your clip. So that was a very frustrating thing with Adobe Premiere, and Excalibur solves this. So I have another tip on how to avoid duplicates on your time frame. What you want to do is enable show duplicate time frame markers. So whenever I don't have it enabled, which is the default setting, if I copy this clip onto my timeline, it's not going to show any indicator. If I enable it, you can see this blue in blue means that I have a duplicate clip. So if I do this here, it's another duplicate clip. Avoiding duplicate clips on your timeline helps keep your audience more engaged by not having repetitive content. Another thing I really like to show is cut through edit. So if I click this, if I cut it right there, we can rejoin this by simply holding Control, highlight it, and then delete it, because we know that this isn't really a true cut. This is just a continuation of the clip. So how do I enable that? Well, go to Sequence and then click this option called Show Through Edits. If I disable it, you can see that it's here. As a video editor, you'd be like, okay, well, are these two separate clips in my project, or like from my camera, or is it actually just one clip? I have no idea. So this should be enabled by default. Honestly, this saves you a lot of time. You know, it's a cut through edit. You can Control, highlight, delete. So yeah, those are just some quick side tips. Okay, so we've almost got all our ducks lined up. All these tasks that I've been talking about are kind of monotonous. It's not very the most creative part of video editing. There's still some work ahead of us. We still have a very menial, boring task that we should probably outsource, and that is to cut out dead air or silence in your A-roll or your talking head. So on this timeline, you can see that I have over 1 hour of footage of me just talking into the camera, and you can see that there's a lot of silences, a lot of breaks, and of course me messing up many times. So in order for me to manually cut this and to remove all the dead silence and all the mistakes, it would take a very, very long time. It would be very, very labor intensive to have to maybe select the razor tool, and then let's say I want to cut this over here. So I would click around here, click this, then select the clip, and then delete, then ripple delete. And then imagine having to do that like 1,000 times. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but imagine having to cut this clip again. So I cut it here, and delete. Now, obviously you can speed up the process by using shortcuts, which I talked about earlier in this section. So for example, if I want to cut right over here, I can press the Z shortcut, which is customized to cut. And then I want to trim everything to the left. So I can use the Q command, and then it becomes a little bit faster, but I still have to go through all my footage and trim it. And that just takes way too much time, especially for 1 hour footage. Thankfully, there is a new software that came out. I'm really excited about it. It's called Timbolt. I'm really very impressed with how well it works. It's honestly just works out of the box. I didn't have to configure it, set the noise floor, decibel rating or anything like that. It just pretty much picked up my voice accurately, cut the clips exactly how I would want it, exactly how someone would do it. And this is the world that we should be living in. We should have these robots, these machines, these computers, this software. It's smart enough to know when there's a silence. We shouldn't have to, do this manual intensive labor work. So I think for the price, what you're getting out of it, the amount of time savings, the amount of, you don't have to pay someone to do this for you, I think it's definitely worth it. Timbolt is absolutely amazing. I'm going to show you a demo, how it quickly works. Let's get right into it. Okay, so if we want to use Timbolt, this is the software right here. Very simple what it is. So we just locate the clips that we want to kind of trim all the dead air. And let's say in this case, I want to trim this one here, and it's just processing. And then what we want to do for Adobe Premiere is export XML. And that was really quick. And let's copy this over. Okay, so you just saw that. That was me repeating the same thing probably 5 times. And trust me, having to edit that would be extremely frustrating, very, very annoying. And you can see how well it just cut the clips over there. This whole process, just took a couple of seconds, but like all the dead air completely cut out. Very, very, very efficient process. And I don't have to manually do it. That is honestly, it just saves so much time. So what I like to do is just skip along the timeline. I like to do kind of like a binary search approach. It's like the programmer mindset is that if I'm saying, hey guys, 5 times. Testing mic 1 5. In this video, I'm going to talk about my port is cable match 5. Okay, so this is the first clip that I actually accepted. So I can label it really quickly. So there I've labeled it, and I know that all the footage here is totally not necessary. I can just hit it delete, and I know that was the good footage. So this definitely saves you a lot of time, saved me all the manual labor, and I really, really enjoy using it. I think it's definitely worth the price. Also, if you have multicam footage and you want to synchronize it, there is an Adobe Premiere plugin that lets you do this. Check it out. In fact, in this video, I synchronized 3 different cameras, 3 different audio sources, and the Timbolt program was able to perfectly match all the audio and cut it and trim it as expected. If you want to download Timbolt, I will leave a link in the description. And no, this video is not sponsored by Timbolt, but they do have an affiliate program that I joined. If you use my coupon code to download Timbolt, it helps support this channel and gives you a discount. So we're finally at the end of this video. Let me conclude by summarizing my main points so that you can edit a lot faster in Adobe Premiere with a programmer mindset. First, create a seed project, something that you can replicate very often, that kind of gives you all the structure, the consistency that you need in order to organize your footage, your files, and all the assets in your Adobe Premiere project. Second, I think you should really invest in the plugin Watchtower so that you can synchronize all your footage onto your Adobe Premiere bins and stuff like that, so you don't have to, get out of contacts and search for things on your system folders and Explorer and stuff like that. Just makes your life a lot easier and more organized. Thirdly, it's extremely important for you to really commit to memory a lot of key bindings. I think that, 5 that we mentioned in this video is a really good start, but there are so many repeated actions that we do quite often that you should really commit to memory. So have that cheat sheet in front of you so that you never reach for the mouse when you really don't need to. The next thing is, if you are an advanced pro user, I do recommend using the Excalibur plugin. I think it's a very, very valuable plugin in order to kind of take full control of the key binding mindset, which is never really have to reach for your mouse and automate all your tasks, especially repeated tasks that take many, many instructions. The next tip is to really use markers. And I really recommend to annotate all your clips. Make sure you annotate the clips, not the timeline, so that it sticks to it. Trust me, not doing this is like looking for footage in the middle of a haystack, having to, search along hours and hours of footage scrubbing just to find that one clip that you mentioned in your A-roll is way too much. So annotate your clips, Control F, and find the stuff that you really want to get. And for my last tip, it is to use Timbolt. Trust me, this is going to save you tons of hours, tons of time, and you don't have to hire someone to do all your video editing. This automated program is really going to change your life. It's going to make video editing a lot more fun so that you get to focus on the more creative tasks and not have to manually edit dead air silence. That can be very annoying. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more of this content, I have a lot more tips on how to edit a lot faster. I've only scratched the surface and I think I've covered the basics, but this is still very advanced. If you're new to Adobe Premiere, I think that this is a good kind of goal to reach, trying to achieve these types of ways to edit, because it's going to make you a lot faster. Let me know in the comment section below if you want to learn more about this, if you want me to create more content. And if you liked it, please do give a like and leave a comment if you have any questions. I'd be very happy to answer. And of course, links to the plugins and everything that I mentioned in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.